Over 70 hours of gameplay, and this is about how much I've explored of Vvardenfell. To say that Morrowind is a massive game isn't exactly an understatement. Sure, the later games in the franchise, Oblivion and Skyrim, both flaunt worlds that are much bigger than this. Hell, Daggerfall's world map is bigger than Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim combined. And even that is just the second largest map in the Elder Scrolls series. However, the difference in size wasn't the only notable change in the Elder Scrolls 3, rather the difference in ambition was. The intro cinematic, if you can call it that, in Morrowind is nothing short of iconic. In short, it's short, barely a minute long, cryptic and oddly eerie, but it so perfectly sets you up for your adventures in the Vvardenfell region of Morrowind, and it feels like there's so much beneath the surface that you've not been told. The voice speaking to you in your dreams is that of Azora, one of the many Daedric princes of this universe, and she's the one that will be your guide throughout the game. Well, I say throughout the game, but really, this is the first of 2, maybe 3 times you'll hear from her. The important part is that you have been chosen. For what exactly is unclear as of yet, but it is slowly revealed throughout the game. Morrowind introduced what would become a staple throughout the Elder Scrolls series, the walkthrough tutorial. Basically, you're led through the character creation process with a series of events rather than creating your character from the get-go. As you leave the ship and head for the docks, a guard will stop you and ask you where you're from. Before you're released into the world, you're asked for your profession and birth sign. It all feels very organic, and it's not entirely without personality either.
Yes, confused? We're all waiting.
When it comes to the appearance of your character, the creation tool isn't exactly up to snuff with today's standards, but honestly, if you're like me and don't really care about how big the space between your eyebrows are, it's fine for the most part. Each race has its own pros and cons depending on which way you want to take your avatar. If you, say, want to get up close and personal, choose a race that has bonus to melee skills. If you want to blast your enemies with powerful magic or sneak around without getting seen, choose a race with the appropriate bonuses. If you want to shoot people from afar with a bow, don't. Look, I don't really understand the hate that marksmen get in this game. I mean, I kinda do. Bows are pretty much useless until you reach about 70 in the marksman skill and have a bunch of agility. Personally, I really like being a marksman, but anyways, more on that later. After you enter the census office, you're greeted by a man that lets you pick your class. Essentially, this will determine what you're going to be good at. This will also determine your character's progression since, and they don't really tell you this, every level in a minor or major skill will give you 1 point towards a level up. So, since this is a pretty important choice, for a first-timer it's recommended that you either choose from the pre-made list or answer the questionnaire, which has some incredibly weird questions. Or you can make a class of your own. Honestly, as long as you don't pick acrobatics or athletics as major or minor skills, you should be good. This is honestly the worst mistake you can make here. Like I said, the custom class option should only be used by experienced people that won't choose acrobatics or athletics as a major or minor skill. Ever. The tutorial also teaches you a lot about the world. For example, stealing is allowed as long as you're not seen. Even if you are seen, exploiting the fact that you're new to this land will let you get off scot-free, if only just once. Just make sure to drop whatever you stole so that you can pick it back up immediately after the guard turns his back on you. You're then instructed to talk to the knight-errant Celes Scravius, where you learn how conversations in this world works. This is probably the most important tutorial in the game, to be honest. I cannot overstate the importance of learning how to ask about stuff in this game. Basically, how it works is you click these highlighted parts of the text to get to know more about the topic. This will be how you accept most quests, learn new information about the land around you, and figure out where to go. All of this is shown here. By clicking the different topics and working your way through the text, you gradually learn that you have to deliver a package to Caius Cassides, who lives in Balmora. This is the first instance of why this game can be so immersive if you let it. You're not told exactly where this person is. After all, not everyone keeps track of everyone else. But you are, however, told where you can look for info about his whereabouts. You're given the package, a letter containing directions to Balmora, and a small dispersal of 87 gold. Wow, thanks, I guess. And so you are finally free. Just gotta go through this door and... just gotta pick up this ring, go through this door, and the entire island of Vardenfell is your oyster. All this nature to experience, all these caves and cities to explore, all of these friendly people to...
Hurry this up, will you?
Well, it was nice while it lasted. Yeah, Morrowind isn't exactly the most welcoming province of Tamriel. Actually, the people here are mostly skeptical towards new folk and like to keep to themselves for the most part. If I had to describe it in one word, it would definitely be passive-aggressive. That is one word, right? Especially the Dark Elves are very xenophobic, but that is explained through lore. For the rest of the inhabitants though, well, I guess life on Vardenfell requires a certain pessimistic outlook. Thieves, bandits, and smugglers run rampant. There's been a steady incline of monsters. People lie, deceive, and plot against each other for their own benefit, and people in general are as corrupt as can be. But hey, when they first start to like you, they really like you.
Welcome, friend. You're nearly a legend around here. Please, talk.
So, there's that. There's so much going on in this place that you could talk about it for days. The small town you start in, Saidanin, is no exception. If you do what the developers intended for you to do and go talk to every person in sight, you'll learn a plethora of things. Let's start with Fargoth here, since he was standing right next to us when we first exited the census building. In most cases, he would be the first NPC a new player talks to, and this seems to be 100% intentional. He mentions that he believes the Imperial Guards took his ring. If you probe further, he tells you that the guards regularly harass him and that the ring is a family heirloom. You can straight up lie to this guy and tell him that you have no idea what he's talking about, or you can give him his ring. Giving him his ring will win you favor with the trader Aril, so now his disposition towards you is a bit higher than if you hadn't held Fargoth, which means he'll sell you his stuff for cheaper. Funnily enough, asking Aril for the latest rumors will have him point you towards a guy on the second floor named Hriskar that wants you to find Fargoth's hidden stash of treasure and give it to him as payment for Fargoth's gambling debt. What a friend. Also, if you gave Fargoth the ring before doing this quest, you'll find it along with the money in the hollowed out tree stump. Turns out it was actually Hriskar who stole the ring and dumped it in the barrel for newcomers to find. It's a neat little explanation of how it got there really, and it makes everything in the world seem more deliberate rather than, oh hey, look at this random thing I found. Exploring the world around you almost always yields some kind of result. Talk to Vidunius Nucius and you'll get a discount on a trip with a Silt Strider if you tell the operator that he sent you. Ask around for the latest news and you'll learn that a tax collector has gone missing recently, and if you choose you can go and find his dead body in a ditch somewhere. Walk the opposite way of where you're supposed to go and some guy falls from the sky out of nowhere. That scared me half to death the first time it happened. The best part of it is that you can kind of see how the whole event transpired. He has 3 scrolls of Icarian Flight, which fortifies your acrobatic skill by 1000 for 7 seconds, making you able to leap great distances. The flaw is that the enchantment doesn't last long enough for you to reach the ground, and as such, you instantly die from fall damage. This book is already on the ground when you find him, so I like imagining him standing there with the book in his hand before activating the scroll, and then as he jumps, the force is greater than expected, so the book just kind of falls down while the guy rockets into the air. These scrolls are actually a pretty nice means of transportation. Well, that is if you can manage to hit the water on your descent, or you have a levitate or slow fall spell. What I really like about these small moments is that they're not pointed out to you or hinted at you by anyone at all. There are examples like these littered all throughout the game, but you need to explore to come upon these things, and they're literally just a small detour from whatever it is you're currently doing. Most are assigned as some kind of quest, some of my favorites being delivering letters between two orcs, getting tricked into collecting a ring in a pool of water and then being attacked, escorting a merchant and then being rewarded with a pair of boots of blinding speed, which literally blinds you. And of course, you can't forget the 2 instances of thirsty Nords getting robbed naked and paralyzed in the middle of nowhere. There really are a lot of quests in Morrowind, and you can for the most part tackle them however you want, though most times the quest givers have a certain way they want their business to be handled, and if you do deviate from that, you either fail the mission outright or get a decreased reward. The most important quest though is of course the main quest. Starting out from Cydanine, Balmora is merely a short jog along a well-marked path. You're encouraged to take the Salt Strider by that one NPC, but honestly, I much prefer walking when it's the first time you're heading somewhere. The reason for this is that the devs strategically placed caves and such along the path of most of your objectives, essentially guiding you to places of interest that you might want to stop by on your way. They do this all the time throughout the adventure, and while it's not required at all, you kind of feel this force pulling you towards the entrances because you're either hungry for exploration or just curious of whatever could be inside. And the best part is that there's always something inside, be it money or better gear. Exploring is constantly being rewarded whenever you're traveling off the beaten path. This lessens the feeling of having wasted time if you get lost considerably. Oh well, I guess this isn't the place I'm supposed to be, but I might as well explore this cave while I'm here. Of course, this doesn't completely negate the frustration of having climbed mountains for 30 minutes just to realize that you're supposed to be on the other side of the map, but hey, it's something. When you eventually do get to Balmora and stop by the Southwall Corner Club, you're told that Caius rents a small apartment in the northwest part of town. Caius is, well, kind of an exhibitionist drug addict, I guess? He's also members of the Imperial Blades and work directly under the Emperor, and we're told to serve under him as a novice in the Blades. This is most likely your first meeting with one of the many factions in Morrowind, of which Caius will gladly explain more about to you, along with the locations of some exclusive Blades trainers that will let you train in a set number of skills. Funnily enough, if you ask Caius for orders, he'll just tell you to go out and explore. Make a cover story for yourself by joining a guild and rising in the ranks, or simply travel the world and look for people to help. I've never really seen anything like this been done since Morrowind. It's like if the first time you meet Zelda in Ocarina of Time, she's all like, yeah, okay, listen, I'm really busy standing here looking through this window right now, so if you could just go out and do some fishing or whatever for a few days, that'd be great. In actuality though, you can just go outside and wait for an hour or so, then go back in and start the quest. But hey, let's do this the proper way. Personally, I tend to join the Fighters Guild and the Thieves Guild to start off, but there are a plethora of other factions, each with their own quest lines, including the Mages Guild, the Imperial Cult, the Imperial League, and the Morag Tong if you can find their hiding place, the Temple, or any of the 5 great houses, of which 3 are present on Vardenfell. House Halalu are the mobsters of Morrowind and probably the more forward-thinking of the 3 houses. House Telvanni is comprised mainly of egocentric mages who care nothing for others and tend to live in isolation, while House Redoran values the settled Dunmer traditions, specifically the way of the warrior. Bear in mind though, when you join a house, the disposition of the members of the other 2 houses plummets to the point where they'll flat out refuse to speak to you in certain areas. So, after you feel you're ready to take on whatever lies ahead, returning to Caius sees him give you an order to find out more about an important Dunmer figure called Nerevar, and the emergence of the 6th house. Of course, information is never free, so you're tasked with retrieving a Dwemer artifact from an old Dwemer ruin just outside Alrune. On the way here, you'll encounter your first real enemy, often dubbed the first boss of Morrowind by players, and with good reason too. If you're not prepared, this mage will straight up murder you in 5 seconds flat. Morrowind is much like other RPGs, where enemies are set at a certain level no matter how weak or powerful you yourself are. This is something I think they completely dropped the ball with in Oblivion, where they introduced level scaling on everything, even unique weapons. but more on that whenever I get to that game. There is a certain level scaling system for Morrowind 2, but the base levels of enemies never go down to fit the player. It seems more to me that it places higher level enemies and better loot at certain points if you're past a certain level, meaning the game never really takes into consideration what your actual skills are, just how high your level is, which is yet again why you don't choose acrobatics or athletics as major or minor skills. The Dwemer is an extinct race of dwarves that no one really knows what happened to. You get a few hints along the way, but it's never really enough to ascertain exactly what happened, so as of yet, it's still a mystery. I do have a theory, of course, but more on that later. Dwemer artifacts are special because not only were the Dwemer as a race exceptionally more technologically advanced than the rest, they're also extinct, meaning that there's a limited amount of stuff left. Take into consideration that the Dwemers as a race are highly considered the big bad in Morrowind, and it makes sense that the commerce of these items are heavily regulated by the Empire. Selling or even altering a Dwemer artifact through improper channels will at best net you a huge fine, or at worst have the entire Mage's Guild try to kill you.
I have you!
Entering a Dwemer ruin is like walking into a sauna after being trapped in a blizzard for an hour. Not only in the metaphorical sense, but also because the Dwemer were really into Steam technology. Most of the stuff is still running, but no one seems to know how it works and haven't managed to replicate it in the thousands of years since the disappearance of the dwarves. Most of the time, these ruins have been scavenged by looters looking to make a quick buck. Despite the heavy regulations, Dwemer artifacts are highly sought after items for smuggling and collecting. After returning with the puzzle box, you get the info required and report back to TES, who tells you to seek another piece of information concerning the Nerevarine cult, and yet again, you need to do a favor to gain what you seek. This time you're tasked with recovering a skull from a tomb. For what exactly is unclear, as it often is, and you're required to fight ghosts. Since ethereal beings aren't affected by normal weapons, the game has the foresight to give you an enchanted weapon before sending you in. However, if you're not efficient in short blades, the fire blade that Sean Gramuskov gives you is pretty much useless. Attacking in Morrowind works a lot like a classic tabletop RPG like Dungeons & Dragons. Without getting into too much detail, when you click the attack button, a die is cast, and depending on the result, you either hit or miss. This is of course swayed by your stats, most prevalently the agility stat, the enemy stats, your skill in the weapon type you're using, and most of all your current fatigue. Even when starting the game you'll be missing a lot, which is one of the main complaints people have regarding the combat, and also why so many give up within the first few hours. Personally, I don't really mind, but it's easy to get annoyed when you're almost killed by a couple of rats, even though you're attacking them with the weapon you're most proficient with. Later on in the game, you'll be able to hit enemies more consistently, but at that point you'll be at around level 15 to 20 with a 70 plus weapon skill. This is also why so many people don't like being a marksman. Even if the arrows hit your target dead center, they won't take any damage whatsoever unless the game decides to register it as a hit and your arrow is still considered used. Not only is there a problem with hit chance, but a lot of the time the NPCs have very erratic movements, which can make it super easy to miss a ranged attack. Of course, you can also take advantage of this. Dodging projectiles in this game is laughably easy, as long as you're far enough away. Enemies aim their projectiles where they calculate you're going to be, given that your trajectory and speed stays the same, which is why you see me moving so much back and forth whenever I'm fighting an archer or a ranged mage. As long as you alter your path the second after they fire, you'll pretty much be safe. After returning to Caius with the info gathered for giving the skull to Sharn, you're told to travel to Vivec and meet up with some informants that lives in the city. If you haven't already reached level 3, Caius will tell you to take a hike and train some more before you're ready to take on this task. This is one of the 2 hard level requirements for the main quest, the other being that you're required to be level 6 to start the final part. Anyways, this is yet another example of why I really like the main quest. You're essentially sent to every major city or point of interest on Vardenfell. In a way, it serves more as an introduction to the world, merely touching on the surface of the culture, the people, and the mythology, rather than a complete history. And if you want, you can easily delve deeper into it after or during the main quest. Morrowind has an interesting way of conveying lore. Basically, a lot is told to you via NPCs, but there are also a bunch of written accounts detailing different phases of history and other events. However, most of these books are written from the perspective of the one writing them, of course, so there is a bunch of either conflicting information or intentional misinformation going around. Combine that with the fact that there's a lot of information just plain missing, and we get a timeline that is at best erratic and at worst false. I'm not gonna delve much deeper into it than that, but there's a lot that can be learned on the web if you're interested. Vivec is a huge city, possibly the biggest in the game, and it can be absolute hell to navigate through on your first visit. But using the world map to your advantage makes it manageable. There's a lot of blatant racism in Morrowind. This is thrust in your face when you go and talk to the Argonian informant. Argonians, Khajiit, and Orcs are heavily discriminated against by Dark Elves especially, but also by the other races. This isn't exclusive to Morrowind either and takes place all over Tamriel. They're looked at like nothing more than animals to be bought, sold, and done with as you please. Slavery is very common in Morrowind, and chances are that if you meet a slave, it's either of Argonian, Khajiit, or Orcish descent. One quest involves escorting an Argonian from Hla-Oad to Balmora. There's a lot of money in these slaves, it tells you. And when you reach your destination, the one awaiting the slave starts attacking her immediately. Now, I'm not sure if that's because we literally broke into his house, but I won't stand idly by and let someone I'm tasked with escorting get killed, so down it goes. Afterwards, the slave, Robina, tells you that she's carrying drugs in her stomach and that the guy was planning to gut her to get it out. After this, you can guide her to the Argonian mission in Ebonheart next to Vivec. Anyways, the Argonian informant is surrounded by pissed Dark Elves, and since it seems like they'll attack if he tries to leave, our options are either to persuade him into not, or killing them when they do. Speechcraft is the skill that governs how good you are at interacting with other people, and it's possibly the most OP skill in the game. When it comes to normal people, their disposition towards you decides whether or not they are willing to divulge certain information, or in some cases do as you ask. You can increase this by either admiring, intimidating, or bribing them. Some things can only be shared amongst friends. If you think you can bribe me, young man, then let me tell you my whole life story, friend! Although shopping is governed by the mercantile skill, you can also bribe merchants and increase their disposition to get better deals on items. Though that might not be as rewarding as being a good haggler. Sorry, I can't go that low. Fine, here's your 2 gold discount, jackass. Successfully increasing the disposition of the thugs will let you get off scot-free, but you can always taunt them into attacking you too. Alternating between bribing and taunting makes it possible to kill almost anyone without suffering the legal consequences that comes from murdering someone.
Now you die!
The way the law works in Morrowind is that as long as you're acting in self-defense, that is to say someone attacks you first, killing is completely acceptable. Using the taunt option to facilitate combat means that as long as you can talk to someone, you can kill them pretty much in the middle of town in broad daylight without getting in trouble for it. And even if you do get in trouble for it, you could always just pay the minuscule fine to get off quickly. Life is cheap in Morrowind.
Your bidding, sir.
After talking to the 3 informants, you're sent back to Caius and then told to go talk to another informant, but this time in Ald'ruhn. This guy is a successful trader and a defector of sorts from one of the Ashlander tribes. The Ashlanders, or the Volathi people, are a group of Dunmer nomads that traditionally hail from Morrowind's wildernesses. They differ from the settled Dunmer in that they don't acknowledge the power of the Tribunal. The Tribunal consists of the 3 living gods of Morrowind, Almalexia, Sothasil, and Vivec. The belief among the settled Dunmer is that the Tribunal are the real protectors of Morrowind, and as such deserves to be revered and worshipped, while the Velothi people follow the prophet Saint Veloth, who is believed to be the father of the Dummer and the one that led their race to Morrowind way back in the day. They also see the Tribunal as false gods that has allowed foreigners to take over Morrowind, and believe that their war leader will come back to drive the foreigners from their land. This guy explains to us the custom of the Ashland tribes. This is actually really important to remember, since it will 100% come into play later, and if you make a misstep, they will not hesitate to attack you. To exemplify these customs, you're expected to find out that he really likes poems, and you need to find a bookstore to buy one for him. I feel like they kinda cheaped out later when you actually get to the tribes though. The only thing they really care about is gold, which you probably always carry on your person anyways. But it was probably for the best. After all, imagine having to travel all over the place just to find some dumb book or a specific piece of clothing or... oh. Speaking of books, there are a lot of interesting ones to read all over the place. If anything, you should always read the books that gives you skills when you open them. They are usually a pretty good read. Whenever I watch videos about Morrowind, they never seem to mention the books for some reason. It's kinda weird, honestly, so to offset that balance, here are some of my favorite picks. ABCs for Barbarians is a must-read. Thankfully, it's not very long, as it only covers the first 3 letters of the alphabet. Chance's Folly is a story about a thief looking to gain great riches by robbing a tomb. It has a great build-up and keeps you on the edge of your seat all the way until the end. A Short History of Morrowind tells you everything you need to know about current-day Morrowind condensed into a few pages. Trap is a thriller about a young man who wished he hadn't succumbed to his impulses. And the Captain's Guide to Fishy Stick is the definitive reference to fishy sticks in all of Tamriel. Well, if you can get the fishy stick sauce out of the pages, that is. Where were we? Right. After returning to Caius with the info you've gained about the Ashlanders, he reveals to you that the reason you're here is because the Emperor believes you are the reincarnation of Nerevar. The same Nerevar that we've been searching for info on so far. Or at least he believes that we are in a position where we can fulfill the Nerevarine prophecies, and they plan to use us to control the Ashlanders and the other Dunmer of Morrowind. You are promptly sent on your way to one of the more civilized Ashlander camps, Urshalaku. It's pretty much out in the middle of nowhere, so walking is the only option. Now, if you haven't already, at this point, you are almost guaranteed to encounter the worst enemy in all of gaming. Whenever you enter combat, the music will change, slightly at first, it then gradually becomes more and more noticeable as a combat tune. The normal music is usually atmospheric and calm, but when the drums kick in, you know you're in trouble. The Cliff Racer is the only flying enemy in the game, and thank God for that. These things can seemingly spot you through both mountains and trees from a kilometer away, and there are never less than 3 of them present at all times in the mountainous regions of Vardenfell. Not only are they masters of dodging, but they also possess teleportation abilities. Cliff Racers not getting stuck in tree branches is more of a miracle than a regular occurrence, and they always seem to find you at the worst possible time. In summary, fuck Cliff Racers, use the console commands to erase them from existence. When you get to the camp and eventually gain audience with the Ashcan, he tells you that you must prove yourself and you're sent to retrieve a bow that belonged to his father. The Dunmer are very concerned with venerating their ancestors. As such, it's only fitting that you meet the ghost of Sul Senipul and claim his bow from him at the end of the dungeon. The dungeon itself is pretty long too, maybe the longest one in the main quest, and it can be somewhat of a slug. The enemies are mainly undead, and there's not really much happening here. Actually, if you've explored one dungeon, you've pretty much explored them all. There's a bunch of unique set pieces in the main quest ones, but other than that, they may throw in an underwater section or some lava or some unjumpable gaps that you will have to levitate over. Since the dungeon is so long, and since you'll be visiting the Urshalaku camp a bunch of times after this, I always like to put down a mark in the middle of the camp. The mark spell allows you to use the recall spell to return to that point from anywhere you might be, though it's worth noting that if you use the mark spell again, you lose the previous mark. When you return, you're finally allowed to see the wise woman so that she can tell you that, maybe you're the Nerevarine, maybe you're not. Who the hell knows, not me, see ya. Well, she does give you some useful information though. You get a written copy of the 7 Visions and the Stranger, which you actually have to write yourself since the Ashlanders primarily pass their traditions down orally, but whatever. The 7 Visions lists the trials one has to go through in order to become the Nerevarine. As of now, we only have an extended knowledge of the first trial, the Stranger, which is fulfilled by us being born under a certain sign to uncertain parents. This sign is of course always the one you chose in the beginning of the game. The rest of the known ones are the 3rd trial, but she refuses to tell us about it, the 4th trial, which describes the Nerevarine uniting 3 of the 5 great houses of Morrowind, the 5th trial describes the Nerevarine uniting the 4 Ashlander tribes, the 2nd trial is a bit cryptic, but that's really all that's known about it, while the 6th and 7th trial is steeped in mystery, since veViolatedTheLaw won't for the life of them write this down, even though their whole belief is basically based on it. Anyways, Nibani Mesa requests for you to find the lost prophecies, but right now, it's high time we report back to Caius. So Caius is all like, hey, what's up? Go murder a cave of people, and suddenly we have Corpus. This is actually scripted, so it's unavoidable, and you automatically get it when you kill Dagoth Garrus. The cave, Ilonibi, is actually full of loot, and as far as caves go, it's pretty unique. There's also what feels like a massive spike in difficulty here. I remember the first time I got here, I was destroyed by Dagoth Garrus. There's a reason he's called the 2nd boss of Morrowind, but this time I killed him without any problems. The cave is also full of nasty enemies that will either deal heavy damage or sap your strength stat. The strength stat is pretty important, and these guys just strip you off it in the course of seconds, making you have to either carry a bunch of restored strength potions, of which you probably won't have, or drop most of your gear to continue. The worst part is that this isn't something that's fixed over time. You need to either drink a restore strength potion, or go to an altar and pray the pain away. It's all worth it though, as you can find the Fists of Randagulf in here. They're pretty much one of the best enchanted gauntlets in the game, giving you 20 strength and 20 agility. There's so much equipment in Morrowind, more than in Oblivion or Skyrim, and enchanting lets you customize any piece with a magical effect. This is done by infusing a soul into the item. Souls are stored in soul gems and are acquired by having an empty gem in your inventory when killing someone under the effect of a soul trap spell. Certain souls are worth more than others depending on how powerful they were in life, and also decides how much you can enchant one single piece of equipment. You can do this yourself for free, but at the chance of it failing and the soul gem getting destroyed, or you can pay someone else to do it. This is something I kinda like. Whatever you want to do, even if you don't have the skills to do it, there's always a roundabout way to get it done. Be that either by paying someone else to do it, using scrolls instead of training spellcasting, or training your skills until you're proficient enough. Most of the time, that also requires money, since the easiest way is just to buy training from any of the many trainers on Vvardenfell. After returning to Caius once again, he's all, oh, you have Corpus. That's too bad, you should probably go talk to this crazy Telvanni mage to have it cured. All the Telvanni mages, or at least the counselors, live in these big fungus towers in different parts of the east coast of Vvardenfell. Divethfir lives in Telfir. It's truly an alien sight, but so is the rest of the landscape of Morrowind if you haven't already noticed. While the west coast is full of giant mushroom trees and littered with mountains and swamps, the east coast consists mainly of grasslands and a bunch of small separate islands. It's all very pretty, honestly, not something you'd expect to see in a game nowadays, but it is helped by the mods I have enabled. I have MGSO installed, which is basically a huge compilation of mods with the intention of upgrading the game to today's standard graphically. There's also a bunch of bug fixes and optimizations in there, but I have tried to keep everything as close to the original as possible when it comes to extra stuff. The mod community for Morrowind is actually still pretty active, so if you're interested in seeing what they come up with, you should visit the Nexus Mods website. Anyways, while doing some tasks for Diveth, we end up meeting the last remaining dwarf in the Corpusarium. His comments on the Dwemer Boots of Flying really highlights just how advanced the Dwemer were. This enchantment is considered trash by his standards. Just wow. Returning to the mage with the boots prompts him to give you the experimental cure, and somehow it works. Now, we're not exactly free of the disease per se, but at least the symptoms are gone, and we're also resistant to all diseases and H. Looks like we have inadvertently fulfilled the second prophecy as well. If you're tired of me starting a sentence with us returning to Caius, boy are you in luck, because this will be the last we see of him in the entire series as of yet. He informs us that there are some pressing matters to be taken care of back in the Imperial City, and has been summoned back there to deal with issues regarding the succession of a new king. More on that in the Elder Scrolls 4, or possibly because of the fact that he's a skooma addict. Good old Caius, I'll miss you, pal. His final order is for us to find the lost prophecies by contacting Mara Milo and Vivek. He also promotes us to the rank of operative, which means that we are currently the head of the Blades in Vardenfell. This doesn't actually make any difference to what you can do, it's really only just ceremonial if anything. He also gives you his clothes, which have some helpful enchantments. Normally I wouldn't wear someone's worn clothes, but it's not like he used them anyways. When we go to Vivek and to Mara's quarters, we find that she's been jailed in the Ministry of Truth, that giant rock floating ominously over the city. This rock is actually a small moonlet from Oblivion called Bardau, which was flung at the city by Sheogorath, but stopped in its place by Vivek himself. So, as I explained, Vivek is one of the 3 man-gods of the Tribunal. As we learn later, the Tribunal's power comes from the heart of Lorcan, an old god, but also from the worship of the people to a degree. As a means of forcing the people to worship him, Vivek left the meteor up in the sky as a show of force. At one point, Vivek temporarily lost his powers, and the meteor got even closer to the city to the point where it's at now, and he still won't move it. Or maybe he can't. The fact that the moon rock moved proves that it still retains its momentum and is merely halted, which means that when Vivek loses his powers, the meteor will hit Vivek City with its full force, probably obliterating the entire thing and everything around it. In later times, the Ordinators started hollowing out the rock and made a prison within it, and this is where Mara Milo is being held. In the letter she left at her quarters, she specifies that you bring at least 2 scrolls of Divine Intervention. The scrolls of Divine and Almsevi Intervention teleports you to the nearest Imperial Cult Shrine or Tribunal Temple respectively, so they're really nice to have in a pinch. You need a levitate spell to get up to the ministry, so it's yet again nice of the devs to give you a pair of pants that grants you exactly that. There's a bunch of ways to get through this place. If you're, for example, a higher ranking temple member, you can just walk through most of it without any problems. You can also bluff your way through by posing as a guard. It's a very nice example of how there's a bunch of ways to do any single quest. I just ran through to Mara's cell and teleported out of there though. Mara tells us to meet her in some secret society off the coast or whatever. To get there we are to take a boat from the docks of Ebonheart, which is pretty convenient seeing as this is where the Scroll of Divine Intervention will take us. Once there, you go and talk to that woman on the docks that was adamant that she wasn't anything but a fisherwoman. Well, I guess she actually is. She asks if we want to go fishing, and hell yeah, I love fishing. But instead of giving us a fishing rod, she gives us passage to some boring island. I'm not proud to say that I got stuck here when I played the game for the first time. I had no idea when dusk or dawn was supposed to be, and I'm pretty sure it bugged out too, because I'm sure I waited there 1 by 1 hour for 24 hours. So I kinda left and went to do other stuff, then never went back there. Inside we find Mara Milo with Galvas Barello, the leader of the dissident priests, and he gives us the Forgotten Prophecies. These texts are kinda interesting. The Lost Prophecy just describes what the Nerevarine must do to win over the 6th house or whatever, but the 7 curses contains the real meat here. This seems like a list of what opposes the 7 trials of the Nerevarine. They also describe the steps at which the power of Dagoth-Ur grows. The first curse seems to be Dagoth-Ur Awakening, and the 7th curse seems to signal the apex of his return to power, meaning a crisis is imminent. The first and second curse concerns the ash storms that originate from the Red Mountain, the big volcano near the center of Vardenfell. The curse of flesh suggests blight diseases, especially Corpus. The curse of ghosts, seed, and despair seems like they're more in the background, but personally I think it has something to do with the metamorphing of the Corpus disease. The ash vampires and all the other horrible creatures we saw in Ulanibi are all Dunmers that have been inflicted with Corpus and have apparently gained power shared from Dagoth-Ur, which transforms them. the weak-willed become corpus stalkers, and the strong become ascended dreamers. The last curse, the Curse of Dreams, is actually something that has been with us almost as soon as we started the game. At some point during the main quest, you have these weird dreams that wake you up from your sleep and is noted in your journal. This happens a bunch of times as you progress, and only when you sleep. A lot of the time it will be Dagoth-Ur almost speaking to you directly, trying to win you over to his side. There are also these half-naked people that start appearing around the world known only as dreamers. They preach the gospel of Dagoth-Ur, and as the curse progresses and grows in power, they will often attack you on sight or when you try to speak to them. This also means that the 7th curse is in effect, which means the crisis is fast approaching. If you didn't feel pressure yet, now is probably the time. So, I guess it's time to get our asses in gear. Returning to our resident wise woman prompts her to nudge us towards Sol Matul, who will inform us of the 3rd trial. But not until we go kill a cave of people. Oh, sorry, a stronghold of people. This place is like a manifestation of madness, truly fit for a 6th house base. There are chairs stacked as far as they go and gold strewn about the floor in various patterns. After this, Sol Matul tells you a riddle you must solve to find the Cave of the Incarnate. You can ask around in the camps for the answers to this riddle, but honestly I never once understood how to follow these directions, so I just ended up levitating straight up in the vicinity and finding that way. The entrance is a pair of giant stone doors with intricate markings. Impossible to miss. Actually, something that I've never thought of until now is how much more enjoyable spells make the Morrowind experience. Not just the intervention and recall spells, but water walking, for example, is so much better than swimming, it's not even funny. If you're able to use a spell that gives you levitate at 20 points or more, odds are that you'll be moving much faster than your ordinary running speed, and you're able to fly at the same time. Though, if you have a spell that lasts for more than a minute, consider investing in a Dispel on Self, because that levitation spell you get by donating a potion of levitation in Vivec City lasts way too long. Another nice thing about the spell system in Morrowind is how customizable it is. You can go to any spell maker and make a spell with a known effect. Say you already have the Firebite spell. Well, you can then make a spell with the fire effect, but you're not limited to it being a touch spell like Firebite is. You can make it a ranged spell if you like, and there are also a bunch of other options to mess with. The icing on the cake though is that you can combine other effects into the same spell. The only real limit is how much magic is required to cast it. Combining a bunch of elements into one spell really makes for an interesting light show, and it can be incredibly OP for a relatively low cost. There's a trick to entering this place too. I don't know why they decided it would be a good idea to have it also be waiting for dawn or dusk. I guess it makes sense since this is actually a Zora shrine, but they could have spaced it out maybe? Or did they maybe think that the line, "The dream is the door and the star is the key," was way too cryptic? Because yeah, it totally is. So I hope you paid attention during the last part, or you'll be screwed. Actually, now that I think about it, this is probably where I got stuck and gave up. It always felt weird how these two parts are so close to each other. Sure, there's a medium-sized dungeon in between, but if you wanted this to be a clever riddle, why give the answer to it only an hour before the riddle comes up? Well, maybe it was to distract from the fact that there's something seriously wrong going on here. When you enter the shrine, you meet Azora. Well, not in the flesh, but via her statue, and she hands you the moon and star, which triggers a short cutscene. This cutscene always gives me the heebie-jeebies for some reason. It's not because it's literally just a capture of someone walking around the world. I mean, you can see the jerky movement that happens when you walk over stuff. There's just something about Azure's voice that gets to me. Also, she in no uncertain terms calls you the reincarnation of Nerevar, but littered throughout the cave are the supposed souls of the previous incarnations? So, how does this make sense exactly? Now, I might be wrong here, but doesn't reincarnation refer to the process where a spirit re-enters the world in a new body? In that case, why are the spirits of the so-called previous incarnations of Nerevar stuck here in this cave? I don't feel like stuck is the right word either. More like imprisoned by Azora for failing to live up to her expectations. Because Azora is the mastermind behind this after all. Let's take a look back at the intro cinematic. Fear not, for I am watchful. You have been chosen. Now, she might refer to the fact that you have been chosen by the Emperor to be sent to Morrowind to exploit the fact that you might fulfill the role of Nerevarine. But I believe that it was in fact Asura who personally chose our main character here to do her bidding, just as she chose the others. The ring is supposed to signal the true reincarnation of Indoril Nerevar. If anyone else were to wear it, that person would die. We know for certain that not everyone who claimed to be Nerevarine got to the point where they'd try their hand at wearing the ring, so that's not how many of them died. If any of these people died by trying on the ring, well, it's not described anywhere. Which is why I think that the instant death is either untrue, or Asura can grant anyone she chooses the privilege. In the end, I guess she's trying to stop the imminent threat from Dagoth Ur and save her people, but something tells me she's got something else in mind too. Anyways, once we return with the Moon and Star, we're told to be named Nerevarine of 4 tribes and Hortator of 3 houses. This is the part which I have stopped at way too many times. Personally, I find this part really dreary, or, well, at least I used to. This time around I found it tolerable. There are a few notable parts here though. First of all, the moment you're named Nerevarine by any of the Ashcons, the entirety of Morrowind suddenly knows about it, and the Telvanni especially starts to dislike you. You'd think that would pose a problem if you're trying to be named Telvanni Hortator, but that is swiftly fixed by merely murdering anyone that stands in your way. That's Morrowind in a nutshell for you. If it can't be sold with money, murder is the only option. But whatever, they were all crazy anyways, and hey, it's a Telvanni custom to kill each other too. This really shows how little life is worth in Morrowind, even among the higher ranking members of society. Hell, even if you're found out, you only get a small bounty, and this pretty much goes for whoever you kill. Another fun one is where you have to find a highborn Telvanni bride for one of the Ashcons. Now, if you didn't already know, the Settled Dunmer kinda don't like the Ashlanders very well, and that goes triple for the Telvanni. The wise woman of the tribe is well aware of this and immediately says, "Nah fam, that ain't gonna work," and sends us to buy him a slave to pose as a noble instead. 2 things. 1. This woman would rather spend the rest of her life with an Ashlander, whom she believes are all barbarians, rather than being a slave, which explains what life as a slave is like. And 2, this is the longest escort quest in the game. Out of all the quest types, these are the absolute worst. Yes, even worse than collecting mushrooms. The quest where you get the Boots of Blinding Speed wasn't too bad, since it's pretty much a straight road. However, there are no roads from Voss to the Zainab camp, and the pathing for these NPCs are the worst. Merely running over a hill can be a Herculean feat for these people, and if you run too far ahead, which you're pretty much guaranteed to do since they're so slow, they'll just end up running in circles until you come back and get them. There are a couple of these that sucks almost as much, but this one's in a class of its own, just because of how long you have to travel. And your reward is a goddamn thong. A thong! And it's classified as an amulet. You're literally wearing a piece of underwear around your neck. I cannot deal with this. You actually get a unique piece of equipment for each time you're named Nerevarine or Hortator, but I never ended up using them much because I had better options. Quest rewards are generally helpful, but since you can pretty much get endgame equipment without even starting the main quest, these things can be either extremely useful or not at all. Then again, this is true for all quests. The rewards don't really change as you level up, so if you want to get a downright game-breaking weapon early, look no further than Boethiah's quest. There's an NPC that can point you towards his shrine in Dagon Fell, but it's also possible to just stumble upon it like I did by spotting a pair of glowing eyes on the seabed. Interacting with him sees him tell you to restore his glory by finding a sculptor in Caldera to build him a new shrine, since his current one has problems keeping its head over water. In Caldera, you'll find an orc looking to prove himself as a great sculptor, and after giving him some funds, he runs off and starts work on some big rock that a famous orc jumped off of and killed himself or whatever. Actually, constructing the statue takes 3 weeks of in-game time, and once it's done, you can just walk right on up and accept your reward. There are other quests that can be done for different Daedric princes, but honestly, this is the only one I bothered with. Speaking of quests I had to bother with, the rest of the Hortator/Nerevarine ones are kinda drab. One involves killing a bunch of orcs in a Daedric shrine, another you basically kill the leaders of a tribe to name a new one, and merely speaking to Sul-Matul will have him name you Nerevarine of the Orshalaku. The Halalu Hortator quest sees you interacting with maybe the best NPC in the game, Carassius Curio. Funnily enough, I had more trouble finding the Dren plantation outside of Vivec than finding Drambero, who is supposedly extremely secretive. It seems like everyone knew where he was, in contrast to the fact that not a single person could point me in the direction of the Dren plantation. This kind of problem only comes up a couple of times in the game, but whenever no one tells you where a certain thing is, it's almost impossible to find it. To start the Redoran questline, you have to save one of the council members' son from a fellow Redoran council member just across the street. It all ends with having a duel to the death with one of them. The Telvanni you already know about, so that officially makes us the war leader of all 3 houses, and Nerevarine of all 4 Ashlander clans. Great! Time to meet Vivec. If you were like me, you were probably just as flabbergasted when you got to meet Vivec in the flesh. What? Meeting a god? I never really experienced anything similar in other games up to this point, and to be honest, they do make it a special occasion. It feels like this is it. This is the endgame. Vivec gives you the plan to take down Dagoth-Ur, which basically boils down to you going in alone while the others do fuck all. It also specifies that you need 2 divine artifacts called Keening and Sunder to sever the connection between Dagoth-Ur and the Heart of Lorkhan. Of course, this will also sever its connection to the Tribunal, but apparently that is a risk worth taking. Remember, Vivec has a giant meteor to ensure the worship of his people. To wield these artifacts, you need a special glove made to withstand their powers. Touching them barehanded will overwhelm anyone and cause death. Vivec puts us in some kind of pocket dimension to learn how to wield the glove without repercussions. But if you were to kill Vivec instead, there's actually a back door to complete the main quest, though it has its price. Going the back route will see you bring the unfinished Wraithguard to the last Dwemer and have him unsuccessfully fix his enchantment, making you permanently lose about 200 health. This makes it possible to complete the main quest even if you messed it up, but it also makes it significantly harder thanks to the health loss. When you have the gauntlet, it's time to raid Red Mountain and its many 6th house citadels, if you want to. They have some really good equipment in them, but the only things you really need are Keening and Sunder. After that, you can just go straight to Dagoth-Ur. The entrance to his citadel is in the center of the volcano and leads far underground. All along the dungeon, Dagoth-Ur keeps speaking to you, seemingly trying to win you over to his side. I really like him as an antagonist, actually. He's pretty much surrounded in mystery for the most part of the game, but he has a certain charisma to him. You finally meet him in a chamber where he's willing to answer your questions. Whether or not these are all lies is up to interpretation, but one would think that there is at least some truth to what he says. Basically, everyone in this game has it in for no one but themselves, so when we are offered the chance at the first strike, that too is a lie of sorts. You might think, oh, that was easy when Dagoth falls, but this is just the beginning. In the next chamber, we meet the real one, and boy, is he strong. Not very smart though, I pretty easily trapped him running in place. Honestly, it wasn't even on purpose, but that makes it pretty easy to get down to the heart. I guess the devs saw this coming, so as soon as you strike the heart, Dagoth-Ur teleports down and starts attacking you. The documents describe for you to hit it once with Sunder, then a bunch of times with Keening. This results in the heart disappearing, or, well, that's what should have happened. And when you cross the drawbridge back to safety, the entire statue that contained the heart falls to pieces. If there's one thing I really don't like about this, it's the music. Basically, the music stays the same throughout the game, and I love the music. That's not it, but sometimes that can feel a bit jarring. It has a knack of getting to the epic parts whenever you're doing something cool, but here it was just really mellow and anticlimactic. And that's pretty much it. No fanfare, no great escape sequence, just Azora greeting you near the exit to say that the people of Morrowind needs our help still. It all seems unsatisfying. From now on, whenever an NPC has the conversation topic Narrow Marine, its disposition against you will go up by 10 until it's at 60. You could continue to explore Vardenfell for a good while, but if you're like me and felt a bit tired of the same old scenery, well, good thing then that we have 2 whole expansions to cover. Tribunal was the first expansion to come out and adds Mournhold, the capital of Morrowind. How you get there though is kinda cryptic. Whenever you sleep outside of Saint-Denis, there's a chance you get disturbed in your sleep by an assassin sent to kill you, presumably. Unless you're at under half health when he wakes you up, you might be at risk of dying. This is also very broken, since the armor sells for way too much for how easy it is to get your hands on. In any case, reporting this attack to any guard will prompt them to tell you to report it to some guy in Ebonheart, who will then refer you to a mage that can teleport you to the mainland. The reason that the only way is via teleportation is because they're concerned about the blight and ash storms, but if you're doing this after the main quest, there's really no reason for this to be the case since it's gone. But I digress. Mournhold is a huge city, and to be honest, I thought it'd be refreshing to experience something more condensed than our adventures in Vardenfell. However, I found that I got tired of it pretty quickly. The cause of that is mostly the huge cave known as Old Mournhold. This is the bane of my existence, it's so boring. Everything feels the same, and the enemy seems to respawn the second you gain a level. They're also overly strong, just look at the stats on these goblin swords. But I'm getting ahead of myself. When you first arrive, you're plopped right into the royal castle. A little side note here, this place is the perfect example of why you should be able to walk through NPCs. It happens elsewhere in the game too, but here especially seems like a hot spot for colliding into everyone and their mother whenever you're trying to move through a tight hallway. This is probably the most annoying aspect of the game by far. NPCs have a habit of positioning themselves either directly in the center of a hallway or in the middle of a doorway. This means that you have to stand around and wait in real time for their script to say that they should move about, and a lot of time they will merely move like literally 2 steps forward and then 2 steps back again, ending up at pretty much the same place. In the palace, I got so tired of it I ended up just killing a guard via the console. But it turns out that the game still puts the blame on you even if you never laid a finger on them. The captain wasn't too happy about that. Since this is the capital of Morrowind, this is also the place where you'll find the King of Morrowind. Now, he's not present when you arrive, but he will be later. For now, when you inquire about the Dark Brotherhood, as they're called, you're told that they have a base down in the sewers. After you go there and kill their leader, you find a contract for your death signed H. After this, you're told to report to the captain of the Royal Guard. He has a few quests for you, but you don't really have to do any of them, I think. I ended up doing a few until I felt that I didn't really get anywhere and started looking around and found Fedris Lair, Almalexia's steward and leader of the Hands of Almalexia. Almalexia is another member of the Tribunal, and the Alm in Almsevi, where Sothasil is C and Vivek is V. As of now, the only way to progress the main quest is by following his orders. First, you're sent into the sewers to fight some goblins, which takes way too much time because the sewers suck. And then you're tasked with escorting a young priest down into the lair of undead to bless an ancestral shrine there. It feels weird that apparently Almalexia herself ordered this green sprout to traverse such danger when there must certainly be more experienced priests available, no? Next, you're tasked with retrieving a ring called Barilzar's Maze Band, supposedly an incredibly powerful ring capable of horrible things. So much so that the creator himself has been cursed with eternal life, as he puts it, and has decided to do everything in his power to keep it underground. When you bring the ring back, you're finally granted audience with Almalexia, and she grants you Almalexia's Light, which restores every attribute by 25 as a reward. Immediately after, there are reports of a monster attack in the plaza, which uncovers a pathway to a lost Wemmer ruin. This place has some incredibly powerful darts that are also being shot at you, but if you can salvage them for your own use, and you have a decent marksman skill, you will be invincible. You also find several piles of ash in these ruins, which is probably what happened to the Dwemer, if you ask me. After they used Kagnarak's tools to harvest the energy from the heart of Lorcan to link every Dwemer with the divine power and attempt to heighten the race to Animedium, it would seem that the process had some unforeseen side effects and simply eradicated them, turning their bodies to ash. I don't know what happened to their souls, but we sometimes meet ghosts of Dwemer, so maybe it was just their bodies that went poof while their souls moved into their machines or something? Anyways, this is where Almalexia starts to reveal her true nature. There's a cult forming in the city called the End of Times, which believes that the Tribunal are losing their powers. And they are. They also preach that the gates of Oblivion are about to open and that the Daedra will walk the land. Yeah, right. And this city is actually out in the middle of the ocean. So, levitation is prohibited here, and this is why. This entire city is actually just a standalone interior cell with nothing but water around it. Seems kinda lazy to be honest, but whatever. So to show the non-believers, she makes us go into the Dwemer ruins to activate a weather machine and use it to cause an ash storm in Mournhold. So if you weren't already convinced that the Dwemer were hyper advanced, they made a weather altering machine that works. Interestingly, not a lot of NPCs have anything to say about the ash storms unless you interact with them. There are a few new voice clips in this expansion, but overall they seem unfazed by most things when you just walk by.
Greetings, friend. I'm up for conversation if you care to talk.
This is true for the rest of the game too.
I like what I see.
You don't really know how an NPC feels about what you have done unless you talk to them or they attack you.
Hey!
Tell your friends about this place.
Of course, when your disposition with people are high enough, they'll change their demeanor around you, but that's pretty much it. They also react to certain things like how you're dressed, which makes going around naked kind of funny.
Clearly you are an idiot.
When we get back, Almalexia continues her descent into madness. One of her hands has gone rogue and we're tasked with killing him. Exactly why he's gone mad isn't known, but he mentions something about how Almalexia has changed. Like Dagoth-Ur, Almalexia also got her divine powers from the heart of Lorcan. Powers which corrupted Dagoth-Ur and drove him into madness. One would suspect that this is also true for the Tribunal and the ones they share their powers with. The hands of Almalexia have actually had their bodies and souls fortified by that same divine power, which could explain why Sal's Valor has gone mad. This guy is a pretty tough fight. I got by kinda easily by using those Dwemer darts I mentioned, and I'm pretty sure I would never have made it if not. You're meant to go here when you're around level 15 to 20, and that really shows. Knowing this, you'd think we'd be more suspicious of the motive of the god, but she's kinda hot, so who cares? Almalexia used to be the wife of Indral Nerevar after all, so I'd guess our chances with her are pretty high. Anyways, next we're told to reassemble Nerevar's sword, True Flame. Almi gives us the first piece but tells us to seek out the remaining two ourselves. One of them is simple enough to obtain. All you have to do is duel Karad, the king's champion, and then ask him about his sword. The other one is a bit weird. There's a museum in God's Reach that collects artifacts and show them off to the public. You need to donate 3 artifacts to get your hand on the third piece, but if you've been talking to the curator and asking about compensation before this, she'll never really mention that you'll get it if you donate 3 pieces of equipment, which is why I got stuck right here. With the help of the internet, I eventually figured it out though, but the problem is that you need to donate, not sell, and the game wasn't really clear enough about this. Once you've reassembled the sword, it's time to confront the so-called source of the monster attacks earlier, Sothasil. According to Almalexia, Sothasil has gone mad and needs to be put down, so she teleports you to his Clockwork City for one final encounter. This place is pretty cool from a design perspective, but these doors move way too slow and these traps are way too easy to avoid to prove much of a challenge. There's a bunch of cool architecture to look at here, and the place is swarming with these dino cyborgs from the plaza earlier. They're really powerful, but also really dumb, so they can easily be lured into the traps for a quick and easy kill. When we finally confront waaaay, we find that... oh. He's already dead? Before we're able to ponder his fate anymore, Almalexia appears before us and goes into a long-ass monologue before she tries to kill us. She's really powerful too, and again, what saved me were the Dwemer darts. On her body, she has Barilzar's Mace Band, which allows us to teleport to Vivec, Mournhold, or waaaay, which kind of explains why she wanted the ring so bad. She needed it to get rid of waaaay. With the death of Almalexia, only Vivec remains at the Tribunal, and as explained by Azora, his time is running out. But hey, if you thought the main quest was the only thing you could do in Mournhold, you're wrong. This place actually has some fun side stuff too. One of the quests has you act out in a play as a stand-in for one of the actors. You are given the script by the playwright and are told to read through it in a couple of minutes. But of course, since time is stopped when you pause the game, you actually have all the time you need. You're then thrust onto the stage and need to actually pick the right lines as if you're acting. And you even get paid for how well, or bad, you do. It all ends in an assassination attempt though, so the play is cut short. But it's really interesting while it lasts, and the play itself is a fun read too. Then there's the wizard that suddenly appears in front of you and attacks. It has a really, maniacal supervillainy feel to it, and it's super fun when it happens. If you visit the local tavern, you can be hired as a bouncer and be tasked with checking on the patrons and eject anyone that's too drunk. You're explicitly told not to kill anyone, but my stupid follower immediately drew his dagger and stabbed him dead. Escort mission sucks. There's also Forstog, the sweltering, who's just standing around shirtless. Of course, because of my previous encounters with naked Nords, I made a beeline to him, but it turns out he's actually just really warm. There's a bunch more to experience in Mournhold. Amongst that, the quest you get from King Halseth, but at this point I was so tired of this stupid closed-in claustrophobic city that I hauled ass over to Solstheim, where the events of the second expansion, Bloodmoon, takes place. The second you ask anyone at all about the latest rumors, you'll be told of a ship that has recently started carrying passengers from Kuul to Fort Frostmoth in Solstheim. Now, Solstheim is an island a stone throw northwest of Vardenfell, which borders to Skyrim, hence the cold climate. So why exactly would you travel to this desolate wasteland of ice and snow? So when you get off the boat, an Argonian there will suggest you talk to either Captain Carius or Carnius Magius at the fort, and you'll be pretty much unable to properly talk to anyone else until you do. Tribunal was what introduced this annoying feature where if the game decided you wouldn't be able to speak to someone, well then you couldn't. But they give you some generic text where the only way to progress is to exit out of the dialog box by clicking the red text. The game used this kind of red text previously mainly for long walls of text that would take up too much space if it was all revealed at once, or when I was asking questions and, most prevalent, confirming decisions. It signaled that this choice is final and that it's likely to affect your character or whoever you're speaking to. Doing it like this also means that you won't be able to use the persuade option regardless of how the character might feel towards you. The worst case of this is, although it's not in the Bloodmoon expansion but Tribunal, probably the quest where you're tasked with killing this guy and steal his weapons, but as he's a red text, you can't really taunt him, and whatever you do while attacking him, it'll get the attention of the other people in the inn, so I just ended up skipping it. It's the same here. Every single guard just tells you to go talk to their commander. Seems like the people here are sick and tired of this place, and he wants us to find out why. Speaking to one of the soldiers will reveal that they're so thirsty for a drink, they can literally smell the alcohol through an unopened bottle. Turns out they've been told by Antonius Nuncius that the captain himself stopped the shipments. If you search Antonius' desk, you'll find proof that he's been seizing the alcohol as soon as it's arrived for the past months. You can actually choose not to report this to the captain and get a key from Antonius that opens his closet, which contains 10 of each basic drink. But ratting him out has the funnier outcome, as the captain punishes him by extending his assignment at the fort indefinitely, prompting him to say this every time you walk past him.
Stuck here. Forever. I'll die.
Next up, we need to find a bunch of soldiers turned smugglers. For this quest, we're assigned one of two people, one of them a warrior and the other a negotiator. Choosing the latter will get you faster to the end, but he's no good in a fight. Regardless of who you choose, you'll eventually end up at the same end, except if you choose saneness, you can let the leader of the smugglers go in exchange for a Nordic axe of paralysis. At this point in the game, its damage is gonna be kinda bad, though it's always nice to have something that can paralyze. The real event starts when you return to the fort. It has been attacked and the captain is gone. Apparently they were attacked by werewolves? What's really cool is that the fort is noticeably damaged and some interior halls have caved in as a result. Whoever of the two you didn't bring tells you to go to the Nord Skal village at the north end of the island and talk to Thorsten Hartfang. It's pretty far and the wilderness is full of new enemies and animals. There are even huge bears. Being a Nord up here holds a huge advantage since most magic here seems to be either shock or ice based, and Nords have an immunity to frost and a 50% resistance to shock, which is nice. Thorsten knows nothing about the attack, though he do know that the Imperials have upset the natural order and that someone must take responsibility. Of course, that someone is us, possibly because we were the closest person at the moment. To restore the balance, we need to perform 6 different rituals at 6 different points in Solstheim. They're all detailed in a tale which we get from the village shaman. You don't need to do them in the same order, but it does make everything more digestible. So since this will take a considerable amount of time, doing other quests in between can be a good way to be more effective with your time. Especially the East Empire Company quests can be done simultaneously, since you often have to wait a bit between each part. The East Empire Company is looking to start up a mining operation on Solstheim, and the one in charge of this is Cornelius Magius. This chain takes you through establishing a brand new colony and then either protecting it or destroying it. So, about 4 parts in, you're asked to take a side. You can side with either Falco Gallinus, who wants the colony to succeed, or Carnius, who wants the colony to fail. Carnius is actually here just for the Stalrim, a magical ice that you can only mine with a special pick. As soon as you have that pick, the colonists have outlived their usefulness in his eyes, and he decides to take some drastic measures to get it disbanded, ultimately resulting in a fake skull raid on the small town. The unique part is that you can choose to either play the hero or the villain, depending on who you choose to follow. This is kind of refreshing actually when compared to the main quests, all 3 of them really, where you're pretty much railroaded through the whole thing. Sure, there are small events here and there where it might seem like your choices matter, but ultimately you'll always arrive at the same conclusion. Here though, you'll end up either killing all the members of Raven Rock or saving them. Speaking of the main quest, after finishing all the rituals, we're still not worthy and need to solve a mystery in the village to prove our wisdom. Well, that was easy. Then a big geyser of yellow light starts spewing out of a lake, and we need to meet the shaman there to discuss our options. So, you're supposed to meet him at a specific point near the shore of the lake, but I went there and he was nowhere to be found for some reason. And then he just appeared after a while, so I don't know what happened. Seems like there's a Draugr lord asleep in a cave down there. Don't you mean awake? Anyways, we're tasked with putting him to rest, but once we get down there, it turns out he's actually good and has been keeping a number of Frost Atronachs sealed away down there so that they won't murder the Nords of Solstheim. You can choose to either help him or kill him, the quest doesn't care, but here's a question. I touched upon the Nords' inherent immunity to frost earlier. Now, how would Frost Atronachs kill a bunch of Nords who are immune to frost? Sorry dude, I think you've spent the last eternity in vain. After we're done reporting to Thorsten, the village is attacked by werewolves too, and in the ensuing chaos, Thorsten disappears. Yet again, just like with the corpus, there's a scripted disease being placed upon you here. This time it's lycanthropy, which will turn you into a werewolf if you let it take its course. It can easily be cured by a potion of cure common disease though. The only problem is that none of the villagers will talk to you as long as you're sick, so you're forced to go all the way back to the fort, or you can just steal a potion from the medicine man. This disease will affect you even if you have immunity to diseases. It's still possible to complete the main quest if you turn into a werewolf, but I went for the faster route, which I honestly kinda regret. Being a werewolf gives you some cool features. After this, it tells us to retrieve a powerful totem for use in another ritual, the Restog, which is supposed to bring favor from the Allmaker on the skull. Yet again, you need to go find some people by the lake, but this time they're nowhere near where they say they are. Like, it's not a case of the shaman just not appearing. I spent a good 10 minutes looking for these bozos before I gave up and had to look up where they were. And get this, they're way into the forest, as far away from the lake as possible. After the hunt begins, our companions gets killed off one after the other before we manage to hunt the spirit bear. We rip its heart out and return to the shaman, who seems rather displeased. Turns out there's been some ominous signs surfacing lately that suggest the Bloodmoon prophecy is underway. At this point, if you head to the north coast, you'll see a bunch of dead Horkers, and this is what disturbs him. He wants us to investigate Castle Karstag to see if it is its inhabitants that are doing the slaughtering, and we're recommended to enter through an undersea cavern. It's really the only option you have though, since the main entrance is locked. Inside, you're supposed to meet with a friendly Reekling and escort him through the cave to gain entrance to the castle. However, this guy looks exactly like the other Reeklings who attack you the instant they see you. The game kinda conditions you to instantly attack any perceived enemy you notice, especially if you're a marksman, so that you won't have to bother with fighting them in close combat. So that's exactly what I did. Now, normally, in the other main quests, you get a notice saying that the thread of prophecy has been severed and yada yada yada, to let you know that the main quest has failed and is impossible to proceed with. Here though, you're told nothing of the sort until you eventually figure it out when you reach the entrance and are told that you're not allowed in without an invite of its owner. So, console commands it is. But you also need that specific Reekling with you later, so now you have to modify the quest flag. It's so weird that this happens when every single important NPC in other parts prompts this message when they die. After exploring the castle, we find that Karstag the Giant is also gone. Abducted by the werewolves, apparently. When you return to the shaman, you are told of the Bloodmoon prophecy, and it turns out everything is in order for it to be fulfilled. Hercene, the Daedric prince of the Hunt, the huntsman and the father of the man-beasts, will walk the earth once an era and initiate a great hunt where he is the hunter and whomever he chooses is to be the hunted. Once you go to sleep, you will wake and be surrounded by werewolves and then teleported to the Mortag Glacier. In here you are expected to fight your way through a labyrinth consisting of werewolves and the other three that had been abducted. This is by far the hardest stretch in the entire game. This place is filled to the brim with enemies, giving you little to no time for rest, so make sure you bring a lot of potions and your best gear. There are 3 areas you need to get through. In the first, we meet the captain, who helps us and volunteers to stay behind to have our back. Next, we meet Tharstan, who Carius warned us about since he got a bad vibe from him, and sure enough, he already has the key and attacks us halfway in. Next is a big hall with a frost giant Karstag standing in the middle. He'll attack us on sight, and after he's dealt with, Hercene himself appears. He asks you to choose the hunter's most important attribute. I chose the aspect of guile, but I don't really know what's supposed to happen. I think it might have something to do with his fighting style, but I'm not entirely sure. They never really made that clear. I just killed him like I've killed all the other gods, by running around and pelting him with darts. Be sure to loot everything from him though, because the minute you exit the box, his body kinda disappears. I missed the spear, but honestly, spears suck, so it's not a big deal. It's just the best spear in the game, after all. Once you leave through the portal, you get this incredibly loud cutscene, and that's it. Again, it feels kind of anticlimactic, not gonna lie. There's no Azora to greet us this time around either, we just dropped into the middle of the tundra. But that's the thing about Morrowind. It never really ends. The main quests are there just to show you around, show you the places you can go and sights you can experience. There's no real time limit either, which means you can stop in the middle of whatever you're doing and just go do something else instead. The real game starts when the main quest is over. The entirety of Vardenfell is at your disposal. Help the people, read up on the lore, become Grandmaster of any number of factions you choose. The sky is the limit. You don't have to do this all with the same character either. Create a new one, go for a completely different playstyle. Do things out of order. The most fun you'll have in Morrowind is when you know what's about to happen. If you're looking for new content, there's a wealth of add-ons out there. One that even aims to make the entire region of Morrowind accessible. And when you've exhausted that too, go into the construction set and make a spell that will kill the entirety of Balmora. The replay value of this game is immense, and every time I replay it, I get sucked into its world. Morrowind is probably the most immersive RPG I've ever played. Whenever I sat down, I instantly lost track of time, and there truly aren't many games that do that for me these days. So I guess the only thing left for our hero is to continue helping out the people of Morrowind until the end of time. Or he can just fuck right off to Akavir. Thanks, Bethesda. Well, I guess that's over with. I can finally get some sleep. You have eluded me for far too long, but now I have finally found you. Play this game or suffer the consequences. What the fuck? Ah, fuck that. I already got the next game I want to review.
Stop. You violated the law. Pay the court a fine.
You've violated the law.
Pay the court a fine or serve your sentence. You violated the law. Pay the court a fine or serve your sentence.